Judith Mitchell's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. Not from the cold, not from seasickness, from the number on the dive computer strapped to her wrist. 2,847 feet. That's how deep the water was beneath the luxury cruise ship Meridian Star when the screaming started on Deck 7. But here's what nobody knew yet. What Judith had just discovered in the ship's restricted maintenance corridor, printed on a single sheet of paper stuffed behind a breaker box. A depth chart, and a handwritten note that said, "Do not cross 2,850 feet. Point of no return." They'd crossed it 17 minutes ago. The ship wasn't stopping, and something in the water was rising. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 48 hours earlier, Judith had been laughing. Actually laughing. Standing on the port of Miami dock with her best friend Alicia Rodriguez, boarding passes in hand, watching the Meridian Star tower above them like a floating city. 15 decks, 3,000 passengers. 7 days of all-inclusive Caribbean luxury her teacher's salary definitely couldn't afford. But Alicia's tech job bonus could. "This is insane," Judith had said, camera already out. "This ship is literally bigger than my apartment building." Alicia grinned. "Girl, wait till you see the cabin. I upgraded us. Balcony suite. We're going full influencer mode this week." Judith should have noticed the first wrong thing then. The crew members scanning their passes, name tag read Sean, had looked at their cabin number and gone completely still. "Deck 12, cabin 1224, he'd said quietly. "Starboard side." "That's the good side, right?" Alicia asked. "Ocean view?" Sean had paused just a second too long. "Yes, ma'am, ocean view." But his eyes had flicked to another crew member, a woman in an officer's uniform standing by the gangway. She'd looked at her tablet, then at Sean, and given the smallest shake of her head. Judith remembered it now because it had felt off, like they'd just been cleared for something they shouldn't have been. The first night was perfect. Sunset from their balcony, champagne they couldn't pronounce. Dinner at the main dining room where the shrimp cocktail cost more than Judith's car payment and tasted like it. Alicia had insisted on posting everything. "Come on, this is content gold," she'd said, filming Judith against the ocean backdrop. "You're literally glowing." Judith had laughed. "That's called sunburn." "No, babe, that's called living your best life." They'd hit the club on deck 14 around 11. Loud music, expensive drinks, a DJ from Miami who kept yelling about the vibe. Judith had started talking to a guy named Daniel. Dark hair, easy smile, said he was a marine biologist on vacation. Alicia had rolled her eyes, but approved. Just don't fall in love and move to his underwater cave or whatever. Alicia had shouted over the music. Daniel had laughed. "I study coral reefs, not mermaids." That's exactly what someone who studies mermaids would say. It was stupid and fun and normal. Until 2:47 a.m., when Judith woke up to Alicia standing on their balcony in complete silence, not looking at the stars, looking down at the water. "Alicia?" Judith had pushed the glass door open. "You okay?" Alicia didn't turn around. "Do you hear that?" Judith had listened. Nothing but waves, engine hum, wind. "Hear what?" "The singing." Judith's skin had gone cold. There's no singing, babe. Come back inside." Alicia had finally turned, and her face had been wrong. Not scared. Calm. Too calm. "It's beautiful," she'd whispered. Then she'd blinked, and the expression vanished. "Sorry, God, I was sleepwalking or something. Weird dream. She'd come back inside, laughed it off, gone back to bed. But Judith had stood on that balcony for another 20 minutes, listening. And once, just once, she'd thought she heard it too. Not singing exactly, more like humming, coming from deep, deep below. Day 2 started normal. Breakfast buffet, pool deck, Alicia filming everything for her Instagram story, Judith pretending to be annoyed but secretly loving it. Daniel had texted, yes, they'd exchanged numbers like teenagers, asking if she wanted to do the shore excursion in Cozumel tomorrow. Judith had said yes, everything was fine. Until the announcement at 2:15 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Walter. Due to unexpected weather patterns, we'll be adjusting our route slightly. This will not affect our scheduled ports of call. Thank you for your patience. Alicia had barely looked up from her phone, but Judith had noticed something. The sun was shining, clear skies, calm water. What weather? She'd gone to the deck 7 railing and looked out at the ocean, vast, blue, empty. That's when she'd seen the crew member. Different one this time. Older guy, maybe 50, in maintenance coveralls. He was leaning over the starboard railing with what looked like a depth sounder, one of those handheld devices that measures water depth. He'd looked at the reading, looked at the ocean, then looked at his watch. And Judith had watched his face change. Fear. Pure animal fear. He'd grabbed his radio. Bridge, this is Deck 7 maintenance. We just hit 2,200 feet. Confirm we're still on primary route. Static. Then, confirmed. Stay on task. The man had stared at his radio like it had just told him to jump overboard. 2,200 feet, he'd muttered. Jesus Christ. Judith had walked over. Excuse me, is everything okay? He'd looked at her like she'd materialized from thin air, then forced a smile. All good, ma'am. Just routine checks. That didn't sound routine. His smile had cracked. For just a second, she'd seen him debate telling her something. Then his radio had crackled again. Reynolds, return to station, now. He'd left without another word. Judith had stood there, watching the water. 2,200 feet. She'd Googled it later. That's deeper than the Empire State Building is tall. Deeper than most submarines can go. And they were in the Caribbean, where the ocean floor should have been maybe 600, 700 feet max on their route. Unless they weren't on their route anymore. That night, Alicia didn't show up for dinner. Judith had texted her 6 times. No response. She'd gone back to the cabin. Empty. Checked the pool deck, the casino, the theater. Nothing. Finally, at 9:43 p.m., Judith had found her on Deck 3, the lowest passenger deck. Barely anyone went down there, just storage, crew quarters, utility areas. The lighting was harsh and industrial, nothing like the luxury above. Alicia was standing at the end of a corridor, facing a metal door marked, Authorized Personnel Only. Restricted access. Alicia, what the hell? I've been looking everywhere for you. Alicia had turned slowly. Her eyes were different again, distant, glassy. It's louder down here, she'd said. What's louder? The singing. Judith's blood had turned to ice water. Alicia, stop. You're scaring me. Can't you hear it, Judith? It's so clear. Alicia had reached for the door handle. Judith had grabbed her wrist. We're not going in there. We're going back upstairs. Now. For a long moment, Alicia had just stared at the door. Then she'd blinked, shuddered. What am I doing down here? You tell me. Alicia had looked around, genuinely confused, scared. I I was in the cabin, getting ready for dinner. And then I was just here. They'd gone back upstairs in silence. But Judith had looked back once, at that restricted door, and she'd seen something that made her stomach drop. Water. A thin line of seawater, seeping under the door. On deck 3. 40 feet above the waterline. Judith didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, laptop open, researching. Meridian Star, cruise ship incidents, Caribbean depth charts, anything. She'd found the ship's specs easily enough. Launched 2019, state-of-the-art, perfect safety record. But then she'd found something else. A maritime forum, thread from 8 months ago. Subject, Meridian Star route change? User at sailormike_72. Anyone know why Meridian Star suddenly changed its standard Caribbean route? Used to go straight from Miami to Cozumel, nice shallow water the whole way. Now they're swinging way south. Deep water route. Makes no sense from a fuel or time perspective. User at crewlife88. I worked that ship for 6 months. Left in March. Management changed something after that incident in January. Never got the full story, but they sealed off part of Deck 3 and rerouted everything. Heard rumors about a hull breach, but nothing official. User at sailormike_72. Hull breach in 12,000-ton cruise ship that nobody reported? Yeah, right. User at crewlife88. I'm just saying what I heard. Also heard they lost a passenger. Woman went overboard at night. Body never found. That's when the route changed. Asterisk. The thread had ended there. Judith had searched for the incident. Nothing. No news reports, no Coast Guard records. Nothing. Like it had been erased. She'd finally passed out around 4 a.m. and woken at 6:15 to Alicia screaming. Judith had launched out of bed. Alicia was on the balcony again, but this time she was pressed against the railing, pointing down at the water. There, do you see it? Judith had run outside. See what? In the water. It's right there. Judith had looked. Nothing but ocean. Early morning light. Small waves. Alicia, there's nothing. It was a face. Judith, I swear to God, there was a face looking up at us. Alicia's hands were white-knuckled on the railing, tears streaming down her face. A woman's face, pale, with black eyes, just staring. And then she smiled, and she'd broken down sobbing. Judith had pulled her inside, held her, whispered that it was okay, just a nightmare, stress, too much sun. But Alicia had grabbed Judith's shoulders. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. I know, babe. It's okay. We need to get off this ship. We're in the middle of the ocean. Then we get off at Cozumel tomorrow. We fly home. I don't care what it costs. Judith had nodded. Okay, yes. We'll get off at Cozumel. But even as she'd said it, something had felt wrong. She'd walked back to the balcony, looked down at the water, and seen something that made her heart stop. A piece of fabric, floating on the surface. Red fabric. She'd seen a woman wearing a red dress at dinner last night. Older lady, maybe 60, sitting alone. Judith had watched that fabric drift away from the ship, and she'd thought, we're not stopping at Cozumel. Judith had left Alicia sleeping. Finally, after Judith had given her half an Ambien from her travel kit and gone hunting for answers. First stop, guest services. The woman behind the counter had been professionally pleasant. Hi, I just wanted to confirm our arrival time in Cozumel tomorrow. The woman had checked her computer. Actually, there's been a slight schedule adjustment. We're now arriving at 2 p.m. instead of 10 a.m. Weather delays. What weather? It's been beautiful. Open ocean weather can be unpredictable, ma'am. Right, And we're definitely stopping, not skipping the port? The woman's smile had tightened. Of course. Is there anything else I can help you with? Judith had left. Bullshit. Complete bullshit. She'd found Daniel in the Deck 9 cafe, eating breakfast and reading something on his tablet. Hey, she'd said, sliding into the booth. Can I ask you something? Marine biology question. He'd smiled. Shoot. How deep would the ocean be on a normal Miami to Cozumel cruise route? His smile had faded slightly. Maybe 600 to 800 feet on average. Why? And if you went off that route, south into deeper water, you could hit the Cayman Trench. That goes down to like 25,000 feet in some spots. But no cruise ship would go there. It's way off course, and there's nothing to see. Plus, it's dangerous. Unpredictable currents, weird pressure systems. Judith had felt her chest tighten. What if someone said we were at 2,200 feet right now? Daniel had gone very still. That would mean we're way, way off route. He'd pulled up a map on his tablet. Show me where we are. Judith had opened her phone's GPS. No signal. Ship Wi-Fi blocks it, Daniel had muttered, switching to his own app. But I've got a marine navigation program that works offline. He'd pulled up their location, stared at it. Jesus Christ. What? We're directly over the western edge of the Cayman Trench. He'd shown her the screen. A depth, reading, 2,654 feet. Why the hell would they bring us here? Judith had thought about the water under the door. Alicia's face, the red dress. I need to see something. Come with me. They'd gone to Deck 3. The corridor was empty. Emergency lighting only. The water under the restricted door was worse. It was pooling now, a dark puddle spreading across the floor. That's seawater, Daniel had whispered, kneeling down. He'd touched it, tasted it. Definitely seawater. But how? We're 40 feet above waterline. Judith had tried the door handle. Locked. She'd knocked. Hard. Nothing. Then Daniel had noticed something. A maintenance panel next to the door. He'd pried it open. Inside, electrical breakers, wiring, and shoved behind it all, a folded piece of paper. Judith had pulled it out. It was a depth chart. Hand-drawn, old, with a line marked across it, 2,850 feet. And below that, in different handwriting, point of no return. Do not cross. She will. Wake. She? Daniel had breathed. Who's she? Judith had been about to answer when they'd heard it. A sound from behind the door. Not water, not machinery. Singing, soft, melodic, impossibly beautiful. A woman's voice, singing something that wasn't quite words. Daniel had gone pale. That's not possible. The singing had gotten louder. And then, through the crack under the door, Judith had seen something move. Fingers, pale, waterlogged, nails black and cracked, reaching through the gap, feeling the air. Judith had grabbed Daniel's arm. Run. They'd bolted. Behind them, the singing had turned to laughter. Judith had dragged Daniel to the bridge. They'd been stopped by security. Passengers aren't allowed. People are going to die, Judith had screamed. We're too deep. We crossed the line. The security guard had looked at his partner. Something had passed between them. Wait here. 2 minutes later, they'd been brought inside. Captain Walter was a woman in her 50s. Graying hair, tired eyes. She'd looked at Judith and Daniel like they were ghosts. How much do you know? Judith had slammed the depth chart on the navigation table. Enough. What's the point of no return? What happens at 2,850 feet? The captain had closed her eyes. We're currently at 2,847 feet. We crossed the threshold 19 minutes ago. Then turn the ship around. We can't. Why not? Captain Walter had walked to the window, looked out at the dark water ahead. Because she won't let us. She'd pulled up something on the main screen. Radar. There was something in the water ahead of them. Something massive. Rising. 3 years ago, this ship carried a passenger named Vivian Marks, the captain had said quietly. Wealthy woman, obsessed with the ocean. She chartered a private submarine dive in these exact waters. Said she was looking for something. Wouldn't say what. She went down to 3,000 feet. Her sub lost. Contact. Navy searched for 2 weeks. Found nothing. Until her body washed up on a beach in Grand Cayman. But it wasn't right. The coroner said she'd been in the water for weeks, but there was no decomposition, no bloating. Her eyes were open, black, completely black, and she was smiling. Judith's hands had started shaking. 6 months later, we got our first incident. A passenger went overboard, jumped off deck 7 in the middle of the night. Security footage showed her standing at the railing, then just stepping off. Calm as anything. The weird part? The footage from 10 minutes before showed her in her cabin, asleep. There's no way she could have gotten to deck 7 that fast. More people started disappearing, always at night, always when we were over deep water. Always the same thing, they'd be in 2 places at once, in bed and overboard. We changed routes, stayed in shallow water, it stopped. Until corporate decided it was costing too much fuel, ordered us back to the deep route 6 weeks ago. Captain Walter had turned back to them. The first night back on this route, I saw her, Vivian, standing in my quarters, dripping wet, smiling. She said, "Bring me more." Daniel had made a sound like a wounded animal. And since then, the captain had continued, 23 passengers have gone overboard. We report them as individual accidents. Coast Guard doesn't investigate anymore. Corporate pays the families quietly. But it's getting worse. She's getting stronger. The deeper we go, the more control she has. Judith had felt reality tilting. Then why did you cross 2,850? Because she made me. The captain had held up her hands. They were shaking. I didn't steer us here. I tried to turn us around, but the ship won't respond. The autopilot overrode my commands. We're heading straight into the deepest part of the trench. And when we hit 3,000 feet, she gestured at the screen. The shape rising from below was getting closer, bigger. She'll have all of us. Alicia. Judith's brain had screamed it. I need to get to my cabin. Now. She'd run. Daniel behind her. Deck 12, down the corridor. Cabin 1224. Door was open. Alicia was gone, but the balcony door was wide open. Judith had run outside, looked down. Alicia was on deck 7, standing at the railing, staring down at the water. Alicia. No response. Judith had bolted. Stairs. Down, down, down. She'd reached deck 7 just as Alicia had started climbing up onto the railing. Alicia, no! Judith had tackled her. They'd both hit the deck hard. Alicia had looked up at Judith with completely black eyes and smiled. She's so beautiful, Alicia had whispered in a voice that wasn't quite hers. Don't you want to see her, Judith? Don't you want to go down? Alicia, fight it! Fight it! It doesn't hurt. The water is warm, and she's singing. Can't you hear? Judith had slapped her, hard. Alicia had blinked, and her eyes had been normal again. Judith? What? Why are we? Then she'd seen the railing behind her, realized how close she'd been. and started screaming. Daniel had found them. We're at 2,950 feet. Captain says we hit the trench floor in 12 minutes. What happens then? Judith had asked, even though she didn't want to know. Best case scenario? The pressure changes destabilize the hull. We sink. Worst case? She takes everyone. Captain showed me the passenger manifest. 2,847 people on board. Vivian took 23 so far. You know what the captain said? Judith had shaken her head. She said Vivian told her, I need 3,000, then I can leave. Judith's stomach had dropped. 3,000 people. That's why we're at 3,000 feet. It's a summoning ritual, Daniel had said. Or a sacrifice, or something. The depth matters. The number matters. When they align, the ship had shuddered. All three of them had grabbed the railing. Lights had flickered, and, through the windows, Judith had seen it. Rising from the deep, a shape, massive. Not a submarine, not a whale. It looked like a woman the size of a building, pale flesh, black hair flowing like seaweed, eyes that were just empty voids. And she was smiling. The singing had started again. Not from speakers, not from anywhere specific, from everywhere. From the walls, the water, the air itself. Beautiful and terrible. Judith had felt it pulling at her, felt the urge to jump, to go down, to join the singing. Alicia had started walking toward the railing again. So had Daniel. Judith had grabbed them both. No. Listen to me. Listen. She'd forced them to look at her. She wants us to give up. She wants us to go willingly. That's how she wins. But if we fight, if we refuse... The ship had shuddered again. Harder. Alarms had started blaring. A voice over the PA. All passengers evacuate to muster stations. This is not a drill. All passengers. The calm's voice had cut off, replaced by singing, Vivian's singing, coming through every speaker on the ship. Chaos. People pouring out of cabins, running, screaming. Some were fighting it. Others were walking calmly toward the railings, smiling, ready to jump. Judith had seen a man climb up onto deck 14 railing and dive off without hesitation. Had seen a woman throw her own child overboard before jumping after. Had seen crew members trying to stop people, only to suddenly stop fighting and join them. We need to get everyone below deck, Daniel had shouted. Away from the water. If they can't see it, maybe... There's water coming up through deck 3, Judith had said. She's in the ship. We're out of time. Alicia had grabbed Judith's hand. Then what do we do? Judith had thought about the note. Point of no return. Do not cross. They'd already crossed it. But what if... Daniel, how do you kill something that's already dead? You don't. You can't. But what if you don't kill it? What if you just... trap it? She'd pulled out her phone, pulled up the depth chart she'd photographed. Look, 2,850 feet. That's the threshold. When we passed it, she woke up. But what if we go back above it? The ship won't turn around. Then we make it. The bridge was abandoned. Captain Walter was gone. Most of the crew was gone, either overboard or hiding. Judith had sat down at the navigation console. I don't know how to pilot a cruise ship. Neither do I, Daniel had said. But I know boats. The principles are the same, just bigger. He'd started flipping switches, checking screens. Autopilot is locked. We can't override it from here. Then where? Engineering, main engine control. They'd run. Deck 2. Through flooded corridors, past bodies floating face down in the water, past crew members standing in corners, staring at walls, smiling. Engineering was a maze of machinery and pipes. And it was flooding, water up to their knees. There, Daniel had pointed, the main engine control panel. They'd waded toward it, and that's when Judith had seen her. Captain Walter, standing in the water, facing away from them. Captain, we need your help. Walter had turned, black eyes, waterlogged skin, smiling. She doesn't need help, Walter had said in that wrong voice. She needs you. The captain had lunged. Judith had barely dodged. Alicia had grabbed a pipe wrench from a nearby toolbox and swung it. It had connected with Walter's skull with a wet crack. The captain had gone down, but she'd kept smiling, kept singing. Daniel had reached the panel. Okay, I can disengage the autopilot, but someone needs to manually steer from the bridge. How long? 2 minutes to disengage. Then whoever's up there has about 30 seconds to turn us before the system resets. Judith had looked at Alicia. Go, I'll do it. Judith, go, I'll be right behind you. Alicia had run. Daniel had started working, and Captain Walter had stood back up. You can't save them, she'd said. She's already inside all of you, in your dreams, in your thoughts. You've been hers since you boarded. Judith had backed away. Bullshit. We're still here, still fighting. Walter had tilted her head. Water had poured from her mouth. For now. Daniel had finished. Got it. Autopilot is offline. Tell Alicia to turn us now. Judith had grabbed her radio. Alicia, do it. From the bridge, 3 decks above. I'm trying. The wheel won't move. Force it. A grinding sound had echoed through the ship. Metal screaming. The ship had started to turn. Slowly. So slowly. And outside the portholes, Judith had seen her. Vivian, rising higher. Her face level with Deck 7 now. Staring at the ship, at them. Her smile had faded, and she'd screamed. Not a human scream. The sound of deep ocean trenches, of crushing pressure, of things that should not exist. The ship had shuddered violently. Pipes had burst. Water had exploded from every surface. Captain Walter had grabbed Judith's throat. She will have her 3,000. Judith had clawed at Walter's hands. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't. Daniel had driven a screwdriver into Walter's neck. She'd dropped Judith. Run, run. They'd scrambled through the water. Up the stairs. Behind them, Vivian's scream had turned to rage. The ship was dying. Listing hard to port, water pouring in, lights failing. Judith and Daniel had reached Deck 5 when they'd heard it. The depth alarm. 2,900 feet, 2,875 feet, 2,850 feet. They were ascending. Alicia had done it. But Vivian wasn't letting go. Through the windows, they'd seen her hands, massive, pale, wrong, gripping the hull, pulling the ship back down. She's dragging us, Daniel had screamed. Judith had looked around. Life jackets, emergency equipment, flares. And then she'd seen it. The ship's emergency ballast, release. If we dump ballast, we rise faster. We also become unstable. The ship could capsize. Better than drowning. She'd smashed the glass, pulled the lever. A deep clunk had reverberated through the hull. Tons of water had started dumping from the ship's ballast tanks. The ship had lurched upward. Vivian's hands had slipped, for just a moment. 2,825 feet. 2,800 feet. They'd reached the bridge. Alicia was there, hands still on the wheel, tears streaming down her face. I can't hold it much longer. Outside, Vivian was sinking back down. But her eyes, those void black eyes, were locked on the ship. And Judith had heard her voice, not singing, speaking, directly in her mind. You cannot escape. I am in the water. The water is everywhere. And you? Judith had looked down, at her hands. They were wet. She hadn't touched water in minutes. You are all water. Judith's vision had blurred. She'd felt herself being pulled. Not toward the Sioux, railing, inward, drowning from the inside. Judith! Alicia had screamed. Judith had fallen to her knees, gasping, choking. Daniel had grabbed her. Breathe! Breathe! Can't. She's inside. And then Judith had understood. The point of no return wasn't about depth. It was about contamination. Everyone who'd crossed the threshold had been exposed to whatever Vivian was. They were all infected. It was just a matter of time before she took control. Unless... Judith had looked up at the depth gauge. 2,775 feet. They were above the threshold, but Vivian was still there, because they'd brought her with them, in their bodies, their blood, the water in their cells. There was only one way to break the connection. Judith had stood, walked to the control panel. "What are you doing?" Daniel had asked. Judith had pulled up the ship's emergency systems, found what she needed. The fire suppression system, halon gas. It would displace all oxygen in the ship for 60 seconds, suffocate any fire, and anything else that needed to breathe. Judith, that'll kill everyone on board who isn't in a protected area. She's in our bodies, in the water inside us. But halon dries everything, dehydrates tissue. If we purge all the moisture from the air, from our lungs, we purge her. It'll kill people. Sick people, old people, anyone with respiratory issues. She'll kill everyone if we don't. Alicia had looked at her. How many people are still alive on this ship? Judith had checked the passenger tracking system. 1,247 people. Over half were already gone. We're out of options, Judith had whispered. She'd put her hand on the activation button. I'm sorry, and pressed it. Alarms. Halon system activated. Evacuate all non-essential areas. You have 60 seconds. The gas had started venting, invisible, odorless. Judith had felt it immediately, her throat drying, eyes burning, lungs screaming for moisture. Around the ship, people had started collapsing. Some had run for safe rooms, others had been too far. Judith had watched the depth gauge. 2,750 feet. Still rising, but slower now. Outside, Vivian had been changing, her form flickering, becoming translucent. The halon was working, breaking her connection, but not fast enough. Judith had dropped to her knees, couldn't breathe, couldn't... Daniel had grabbed her face. Stay with me, 30 more seconds. Alicia had collapsed, gasping, lips turning blue. 20 seconds. Vivian had screamed again, fainter this time. 10 seconds. Judith's vision had gone dark at the edges. 5. She'd thought, we're going to die. We saved no one. Halon purge complete. Ventilation systems restarting. Fresh air had flooded the bridge. Judith had gasped, coughed, breathed. Alicia had sat up. Daniel had laughed hysterically. And outside the windows, Vivian was gone. Just ocean, empty, blue, normal. The depth gauge read 2,710 feet. Above the threshold, and climbing. Coast Guard had reached them 6 hours later. Final count, 891 survivors, 356 dead. Officially attributed to catastrophic system failure. No one mentioned Vivian. No one mentioned the deep. The ship was decommissioned, scrapped in a Brazilian shipyard. Alicia had gone to therapy for 8 months, still wouldn't go near the ocean. Daniel had quit marine biology became a high school teacher in Colorado. Mountains, not water. And Judith had gone back to work, back to her small apartment, back to normal life. Except for one thing. Every night when she showered, she kept her eyes closed. Because once, just once, she'd looked down at the water swirling around the drain and thought she'd seen a face. Pale, black-eyed, smiling. The news had reported the incident for 3 days, then moved on. Some families sued. Most settled quietly. Cruise industry stock had dipped, then recovered. Life went on. But Judith had kept the depth chart, framed it in her apartment, a reminder. And every time she looked at it, she thought about something Captain Walter had said, right before the end. She needs 3,000. They'd saved 891, which meant Judith's blood had run cold. Vivian had taken 2,109. She was 891 short. The phone call had come on a Tuesday. Unknown number. Judith had almost not answered. Hello? Static, then faintly singing. Judith had hung up, blocked the number. But that night, she'd dreamed of deep water and a pale woman, rising, still smiling, still hungry, still 891 souls short of freedom. Judith woke up and checked her phone. 891 new followers on an Instagram account she'd never created. All of their profile pictures were the same, an empty ocean. And the account name was at point of no return _2850. The most recent post was from 3 minutes ago, a photo of Judith's apartment building. Caption, "The water is everywhere. I'm coming up." Judith walked to her sink, turned on the faucet, and watched the water run. Clear, normal. Except, just for a second, it had looked like it was flowing up the drain, not down, up. She turned off the water, and in the silence, she heard it. Faint, impossible, coming from the pipes, singing.